Hi friends, I'm Anna Hellman, and today I have a really fun interactive card design to share with you. It's a flip card, and you can create it with dies that you likely already have in your collection. Let's take a look at it. Here are two samples of this flip card. So I'll show you how they work first, and then I want to share with you how to actually create one of these. So it's a card that has a simple little fold right here, and when you open it and pull on it, it actually flips that piece on the front around. And this one is not quite complete. We will finish this towards the end of this video, but I'll show you this piece and how this one flips around. So you can create these with lots of different shapes of dies. When you're choosing a particular die to use, I found that I think the circle is actually easiest, but you definitely want to choose a die that is symmetrical, so the same on both sides. I would recommend choosing a die that does not have stitching around the edge. If you have stitching, it's going to look a little funny. We're actually looking at the back side here of what got cut, so that may look a little bit funny. But choose something symmetrical, and like I said, if you're just trying this out for the first time, you may want to start with circles. I found that was a little bit easier than the other one. So I had a die set several years ago that made cards like this, and I thought, well, you can make those on your own with your regular dies if you just play around with it and figure it out. So I want to share that with you now. What you're going to need is a piece of cardstock that measures 5.5 by 5 7/8. I will bring my cardstock in with my trimmer. We need to do a little bit of scoring, and then we will go ahead and do our cutting. So the first thing we need to do is scoring at two different spots. And you will want to line it up first at 2 1/8 inches here on the left side of the cutting or the scoring area. So I'm going to score a little bit at the top and a little bit more at the bottom. If you know where your shape is going to end up, ideally you want to score down to where the shape starts and up to where it stops, but you don't really have to know that exactly right now. You just want to score a little bit at the top and a little bit at the bottom. 2 1/8 inches. Now let's scoot over to 3 inches, and we are doing the same thing. A little bit at the top and a little bit at the bottom. So you notice I'm going all the way across. I'm not pressing here in the center. I only pressed up here at the top and down here at the bottom. So let's take a look at that and see if you can see those score lines. Hopefully you're able to see those, and if not, that's okay. But what we want to do next is line up the die that we're using. For this one, let's use a circle. And you may notice I have a mark here and a mark here. The die that you're using, it is important that you find the center of it. So to find the center of the dies that I used, I laid them on my trimmer. You could lay them on grid paper, anything that has measurements on it. And I took a look at the full width, and then I figured out whatever half of that was, and I put a line at half in the center, and at the top, and in the center at the bottom. So here, this die is from a set called Layering Circles. It's probably my most used, or one of my most used die sets of all time. And then this one, my other sample that I showed you, this is from a set called Something Fancy that has some really nice tags in it. So I did the same thing with that. I measured from left to right, put marks in the center. Now you want to make your marks with something permanent so it doesn't rub off. You can use your alcohol markers, or a Sharpie would work perfectly. Once you know where your center line is and you have that marked, you will want to line up those marks with the score line on the left side. Now, I should have mentioned when I did my scoring, I had my paper laying horizontal, so it's a little bit wider than it is tall. So the 5.5 inch side is up and down. The 5 7/8 is this direction. So I did my scoring. Now those two score lines are still over here towards the left side of my cardstock. And I want to line up my die so that both of those marks are in line with the score line on the left side. When I get that in place, I want to hold it somehow. So you can use a Post-it note, piece of washi tape, some other kind of removable tape, and just hold that die in place. I'm going to bring it up closer. I am hoping you are able to see where that score line is and that my center marks on the die line up with it. Now I'll bring in my cut and emboss machine. And I apologize now, there will probably be some shaking of my camera. What we're going to do here is only cut on this side of the first score line and only cut on the bottom side, the left side over here of the second score line. So to do that, what I'm doing, I'm lining up my platform bases. They are basically all right on top of each other. But my top one, I am going to line up so that it is only, it is on the top side, the right side of my first score line. And what I found was if I keep it just on this side of the lines on my die, that it will actually end up cutting all the way over to those lines just because of the way it presses. So line it up right with that score line or just on the right side of it and crank that through. And then without moving anything, without moving that Post-it or your die, you want to flip it around the other direction and do the exact same thing with the other score line. So line up the edge of the plate with that score line or just on this side of the score line. We'll crank it through again. If you are looking for a cut and emboss machine, I absolutely love mine. It folds up, it stores small, it cuts better than the other machines I've used in the past. I absolutely love it. So I'll put a link in the video description below to information about my cut and emboss machine. And the other thing, I get lots of questions about this, the lines on my trimmer. I'm going to put a link down there for the video where I explained what these are and how I mark them. I created this to make it easier to cut and score my card bases and my card mats. So both of those links will be down there if you want to take a look. Okay, now we can remove our die in the Post-it note. And what you should see is cuts on the right side of the right score line, cuts on the left side of the left score line. Now, if your score lines don't fully go to the shape, you do want them to line up completely. So I will, my one on the left already lines up pretty good, so I don't really need to do that one. But if you do line it up again at 2 1/8 inches, you'll score from the top down to where your shape starts. Then you'll score from the bottom of your shape down to the bottom. Slide that over to 3 inches, score from the bottom up to your shape, and from the top of your shape up to the top. Okay, now I'm going to turn this left 90 degrees. I'm going to fold that top piece down and use my bone folder to give that a nice good crease. You're definitely going to want a bone folder for this card so that it will lay flat. Now I'm going to flip the whole thing over so that I can see this other score line, and I'm going to fold this piece back towards me. Now you may be able to see when I did my first score line, I went a little bit too far, so it shows on my center circle. Ideally, you only want to score a little bit at the top and bottom so that that doesn't happen. But once I add decorations and things, most likely that will be covered up and it won't matter at all. So here we have our flip card with that circle piece and in the center that flips around. Isn't that neat? So I want to show you how to decorate this one I have right here. And I was going to show you that second die that I used. So same idea with this one. When I cut with this one, I had my markings on my die. I lined up those markings with that left score line. I put the Post-it there to hold it in place. Cut this side, cut the left side, and ended up with the same thing. So you could really do a lot of fun shapes with these as long as the dies you're using are symmetrical. And you might even be able to get it to work with some that are not symmetrical. They just line up perfectly on the left and the right sides if they are symmetrical. So let's finish this card up. I was debating what to decorate the center of this card with, and I have this new Nested Friends stamp and die set. I thought it would be a really fun one just because of the shape of my circle. I thought the bird's nest would fit perfectly in there. So I decided that this was how I wanted to decorate it. Now let me explain to you what I've done so far because I did some of this off camera. I stamped the bird's nest right here in the center. Now, sometimes I do things a little unconventionally. That's what creative types do, right? We don't always do things the right way. We just kind of figure out what we want to do. So I was trying to figure out how to stamp this bird's nest in here on that circle. And so I inked it up. It was sticking to my hands just like this because there's not space in here for a block. I stamped it like that. I ended up getting it back out. In the process, we got a little smudge, but no big deal. We'll cover that up here in a second. And then I realized like, oh, I could have just done it back here on the back side. So if you decide you want to create a card like this, you can do your stamping of the bird's nest however you like. I debated whether I even wanted to stamp it or if I just wanted to use these die cuts that I prepared, but I liked the nest there in the background. So stamped it with some soft suede ink. I used markers to color in some of the leaves and branches, added the little texture stamp down here and up here. And I created several layers. So the bird's nest itself is 2 layers. I stamped the bird with some suede ink, and I used a watercolor with Pacific Point and a water painter with Pacific Point and clips of coral ink to color it in. Added the little eggs behind, and we will add that there and this here. But I wanted one other little extra touch, and I thought it would be kind of neat to give it a little more of a realistic bird's nest type feel if I added in some linen thread. Linen thread is quite possibly one of my most used ribbons or trims, and we're gonna have to play around with this. So a lot of times I'll add trim like this back behind a sentiment or back behind one of the pieces of my card. And what I do, I just put adhesive down like you saw, and then I just sort of wind it back and forth and press it into that adhesive. And once I have it down, I usually lay this over top and take a look at it and see like, okay, do I like the way that looks? Do I not like the way that looks? And I do. Sometimes my loops end up too big. Sometimes they end up too small. I think that ended up just perfectly. So let's put some adhesive on the back of the nest. We will put that in place, and we will add the greeting. So I did add 1 dimensional back behind my bird for it to pop up a little bit, to give it a little bit of dimension. I think I will add dimensionals over here on the left side of this. I don't want to put adhesive across the full sentiment because it is going to cross the opening right here. So I don't want any adhesive down here. Otherwise it is going to glue it shut. And I think I may add a few sequins real quick as we wrap up. So thanks so much for watching along. I hope you can use this flip card design in your crafting. If you do, I would love to see what you create, so you can send some pictures or share them on my social media sites. If you're new here, I would love for you to subscribe to my channel. Take a look at the products I used in the video description below if you're interested in looking at them or ordering any of them. I hope you have a blessed day, and I hope you'll be back again next time when I'll be here helping you to hand make with love.